let's look at what do you understand, when we say, let me put it this way. So let's look at it. Were you able to go through some of the bits that we have given across in the generic, section of the course, like background on hospitality management, travel and tourism practices? Did you go through some of this stuff?
I only yeah, read some of this stuff, but
Right.
basically because you sent me the invites with this strategy management, so I try to focus on reading some of the things for strategic management. But hospitality management, basically, I have the idea of this one because I am
That's
working with the in the resort, right?
That's great. Okay. So I think that is to just build a bit of a background. I know that you're doing this course and you're working within this field, so you have much more, kind of current knowledge and
Mhm.
experience. But sometimes what we do get to see is some learners, they struggle with the context of, tourism and hospitality management. Now, if we briefly look at, just to kind of lay the foundation for, um, the unit that we are starting. Now, if we look at, for example, the tourism and hospitality as a term. Now,
Uh-huh.
tourism and hospitality as a term, what do you think tourism and hospitality as a term signify? What do you mean by the word tourism?
Tourism is basically the travel.
Okay, yeah, that's a good start. So,
Uh,
tourism definitely, has the word somewhere called travel in it in terms of its
yes.
definition. But when we look at, the tourism, when we say traveler or travel is primarily an activity. Tourism, when you look
Yes.
at, is the so when we talk about tourism, it can be defined in different ways. Sometimes we look at, no, I'm not going to go by the dictionary definition, but typically
Uh-huh.
when you look at leisure, you look at, holidays, you look at things like traveling, as you mentioned, you look at an activity that you do primarily on a holiday, but that is not an activity that you do on a day in, day out basis. Like you're in the office, you do your office work, but
Yeah,
sometimes
that's
you're in a
right.
holiday mood and you do a different activity. So here,
Mhm.
the term tourism, in general, basically means, if we look at the definition of tourism, it means doing a certain set of activities which can only be done when you are on vacation. So tourism as a term basically signifies that people tend to travel, they go places, they go outside their usual environment, which is could be work environment, home environment, outside the country, any place. But this is primarily done from a point of view of undertaking, rest, leisure, or maybe business or other, even other
Mhm.
activities. You see a lot of
Yes.
people travel because of, they want to travel for business, they want to travel for, meeting friends and family. Sometimes you travel on holidays, you travel for other reasons in terms of, say for example studying. But all such activities that you do which are taken across from a point of view of going to a particular destination, and in that, at that destination you only end up doing certain set of activities which are related to leisure, or activities related to relaxing, would be classified as activities under tourism. Now, what would the word hospitality according to you look at? What?
Well, basically, hospitality is like a relationship between between maybe a customer and a host, and it comprises of maybe services that you are giving the customer.
Yes, absolutely correct. So you're right on that. Again,
Mhm.
here the word hospitality would mean, if we look at the traditional dictionary meaning, it would mean that, as you rightly said, that you're trying to establish a relationship. And in that, whether you look at customers or visitors, you are actually in the process of, giving them some sort of a friendly service, or, you're basically looking at giving them some sort of a service which will mean that that service is very well received. And because that service is very well received, that particular sector would be classified as something called hospitality. Now,
Mhm.
hospitality would consist of things like, as you work in a leisure resort, that would be one of the things which covers hospitality. It could be things like hotel, bars, restaurants, people where they go out, eat and drink, do activities. They will all be considered as activities which you do primarily for leisure. And when
Mhm.
you do these activities primarily for leisure in a particular place, and in that place you utilize a particular type of facility like a hotel or a spa or a restaurant, that place would tend to give you a product or a service, and that service, when it is delivered, would be considered as something called hospitable service or hospitality. Is that okay?
Yes. Yep.
Now, so from our point of view, there are various examples that we can look at when we look at the word, hospitality in general. And here, in some cases, when we look at Asian culture, what we see is a guest is maybe an incarnation of God, and that also means that when you go to when you go to resorts, you're on a holiday, you're treated well, and that also relates to the concept of something called hospitality.
Mm-hmm.
Now, having understood that, what we want to be able to do is, as we know that this particular sector is the largest employer of people in the world, it is one of the most profitable and booming industries after the industrialization era. So what we have seen is that after the World War II, when modernization started to happen, a lot of people started working in industries, which is what we call the industrial era, and the advent of technological advancements like aircraft, television, and other things in which basically have promoted the interaction amongst people. What we have seen is activities which people now undertake for the purposes of relaxation have increased, and all such activities come within the tourism industry. Now, in this case, what has happened is, because this sector has become very organized and it uses technology quite a lot nowadays to create a connect. It could be a simple thing like you do a booking online for a hotel. Even before you travel, you're able to make payments. Now, these things were not available maybe 20 years back, because most of this was done through the intermediaries like the travel agent or your flight operator or things like that.
Yes,
But
correct.
because things have now become a reality, what has happened is the advent of management has also come into this sector. And when I say the advent of management, means there are structured processes now being put in place within this business and this sector, so that most people and most different types of industries which are involved in providing these services to the customers are able to function effectively, productively, and in tandem to be able to provide those services. So what we do see that when we look at these people, the rich people able to travel and take holidays. Cities and towns used to travel maybe across to the local beach and things like that, because the mode of transport wasn't very easily available. Public transport in some cases wasn't very much developed, and those are the reasons why people did not go out for leisure activities. But as the world has become a connected world, because of flights now easily available, you can pretty much go across the world in about a 14, 16, 18 hours flight, and you can be in one location. Within 18 hours you can be in the other, and that has made possible the the advent of, let's put it this way, it has made tourism possible for a common man, or people even who are, it does not require you to be wealthy or having a lot of money to be able to travel for holidays or go to a destination. And because this change has happened over the years, what has happened is the concept of strategic management, in terms of thinking a process in order to make it much more effective, has actually also come to the travel and tourism sector. Now, the whole idea of having strategic, when I say management, what do you think is the definition of, how do you think you will define management?
Management is a method or a process on how you handle things. Like, for example, specifically for strategic, you are dealing with a process on how to execute like a strategy based on your defined like vision, mission, and goals, something like that.
Absolutely. I think you're spot on that. So basically, the process of management was invented in the industrialization era, because when a lot of people started to work within factories, what they had to do, what the bosses and the people in the management position realized, is that they need to create processes which will make some of these functions quite standard, in order to review, in order to set responsibilities, and in order for them to achieve goals. What they had to do is they had to invent a lot of processes, which meant that these things could happen time and again in the same manner, which will yield same set of results. Now, when we look at a bit of an evolution on strategic management, this is how what we see is a bit of the evolution coming across, wherein if you look at after the post World War II era, we had mostly in the 1950s, then we had 60s and 70s. So we've divided it amongst the major changes which we have seen in terms of evolution of technology in the last 50 years. Now, in the 50s, most of the focus was primarily on, bringing in processes into industrialization to make it work from a point of view of budgetary control. Things like people worked in shifts, and in order for them to produce goods and articles which were profitable, they had to restrict the number of workers within the shift, had to make sure that the work that they do, was meaningful and it was productive. But when we look at the definition of 60s and 70s, what tended to happen was that some of these processes, like the industrialization happened, most of the production became, things like, if you look at the cars were invented in 1902 by Ford, for example. But by the time we reached the 1950s and 60s, there were pretty much industrial plants which are available, which were producing cars or mass producing products which consumers could buy from the shops. But in the 1960s and 70s, the definition of strategic management slightly changed, because what they realized was that as America and some of the Western economies started to produce a lot of goods, they could not sell most of the goods within their own country. The consumption, in order to find increasing consumption and increasing sales, they had to venture out to other countries wherein they could sell these products. So that led to the creation of something called corporate planning. That means companies started to become global, or they started to have subsidiaries in other locations so that they could also sell some of these products being produced in one country. Now, in the 70s, 80s, a lot of competition came in. So maybe you had 3 or 4 different car manufacturers, you had maybe 5 or 10 hotel chains in the early 60s and 70s. But as the businesses started to expand, what we tend to see is that a lot of different products were being created, a lot of competition came in, a lot of other businesses started to offer similar services. And most important criteria which started to happen was that in order to differentiate these services, a lot of businesses started to position themselves differently. Like you had some of the old hotel chains, can you think of some of the old, the oldest hotel chains?
Marriott.
Yeah.
Hilton.
So there are lots of hotels which, have rich history in terms of when we look at, their history that it's been running for, say, 50 years, 100 years, things like that. So in the UK, when you look at, some of the old hotel chains, what you will find is that they were maybe just 1 or 2 hotels of that type within England. But when they started to branch out, they started to give out their franchise or, different type of, when you look at Marriott, for example, or you look at Holiday Inn, these kind of hotels, they started to create branches. And here, because there were lots of others who were providing the similar services, positioning of the hotel started to become important. That means they were looking at positioning themselves as a premium provider. There were budget hotels and things like that. So that is the 80s. And then when we look at 80s and the 90s, what we did tend to see is that because the industrialization became mass, it became pretty much prevalent across all the sectors, and a lot of people started to offer services. That means a lot of substitutes were available. So if you had to go out and buy something in the market, it was not just one airline or one hotel which was providing you the service. You could actually compare, or you could actually go across to a different hotel if you did find the price or the package to be much more attractive. So in the 80s and the 90s, it was more of an era wherein the companies or the organizations actually focused on creating competitive advantages. That means they said that, okay, if you stay 4 nights with us, the 5th night was free. That was maybe a promotion done, but the idea was to create some advantage. The star rating of the hotels, when you look at, 1 star, 2 star, up to 7-star ratings started to come in. There were some industry bodies which actually came across, and they started to look at, categorization of the, services in the hospitality sector. We did also see that in this particular time era, we did see that some services which basically came across, allowed the incorporation of technology into it. So up until now, we had only in the 80s and 90s, when I say, we only had travel agents. But when we moved to 2000s, you see with the advent of internet, people were able to book tickets online. They were able to buy, hotels, or, book hotels online. So these kind of
Yes.
things, typically happen. Now, the idea, one, strategic management as a function is evolved, and the second is that when we look at the function, how that function has been actually implemented within the tourism and hospitality sector, and how this has changed the way processes are applied, or how strategic planning is done from a point of view of annual planning, 2-year, 3-year, 5-year planning. Now, most of the resorts which are built, you're working in one of them, they typically look at a 3-year, 5-year, 10-year planning, isn't it?
Yes,
So their
correct.
planning is to look at how, you don't buy land and you build and then you are able to make profits from day one. They look at breaking even in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, things like that. So as a process, management is basically nothing but a process to manage some of these things more effectively, so that you have defined outcomes. The whole idea of putting processes in place / management in place was to control the output of say a raw material, or output of a number of people working on a particular job or responsibility. Now, this definition has changed across the decades for every sector, and it has an implication of change, for the tourism and hospitality sector as well. Some of the that we see, which have come across in the sector, is that as the definition has changed, the issues which management as a process tended to solve have also changed, right? So just to look at an example right now, what you will see is that maybe when we were looking at factories and people working within the factories, what we did see was that the main aim was to produce goods at a certain cost, and cost control was most important, because the owner wanted to control the cost in terms of number of workers working, the shifts they were working, so that he could make profit. But if you look at how this has changed over the years, is that now with accounting packages available, most of the data residing on cloud, the people who are in the management and manage finances are able to, at a click of a button, get hold of, say for example, the inventory, the buying inventory or purchase orders. They're able to look at the bookings, and they are able to look at receivables, or money which is owed in terms of debt within the sector. And this has all happened because of the integration of technology within this sector.
Yes.
And when we look at that, and if we extend that slightly further to the concept of what are the implications, we do see that because now there are lots of substitute products available, there is a definite need by the companies to create some sort of a differentiation or a competitive advantage. And in this creation, in this lust, or in this basically race to create competitive advantage, most companies are looking at, within the sector, there is a consolidation which is happening, restructuring which is happening, mergers and acquisitions are happening. And the larger the business, the more cash flows you have, the larger the presence in terms of locations, you're able to attract more customers. So the scale of operations has become huge. If I look at a hotel, maybe in the 1950s, it was one branch placed somewhere in one particular city, and the person of the management within the hotel, they stayed within the hotel, they were able to manage pretty much all the functions. But as the expansion of operations has happened, what that has meant is that all of this is now happening across a lot of different places, a lot of different countries. And because this is happening in a lot of different places and a lot of different countries, there is a need for adopting, something called strategic approach to addressing business for that particular territory. So how you attract customers in China might be different from how you attract customers in Europe, might be different from how you attract customers in America. And the reason why this is the case is because you have to look at culture, you have to look at people's preferences, you have to look at the economic levels in terms of income, and to a certain extent, you also have to look at the developments in that country, and what that means for people to be able to use or, come across to do activities for leisure in, tourism. So the concept of strategic management, which is nothing but processes being controlled very tightly by people who are in the management position, is becoming more and more important within this sector because of three reasons. One, this sector is a services sector, right? You deal with a lot of people and you provide a lot of services. Second is there is a lot of competition within this sector. This is one of the largest employer in the world, but it is also one of those sectors in which there is very fierce competition because there are lots of products available and a lot of products are similar products. So in order to create or get that business, there is a lot of substitutes, and that is why there's a lot of competition. And the third thing, a lot of people are, or when I say people, means a lot of organizations look at the very essence of how they approach that problem to be able to address it, restructure it, and also look at gaining an advantage over their competition if they are able to say adopt and implement something as a first mover advantage. A simple example I would do is, if you remember when the online or the hotel, online, when you look at the hotel management booking system used to work, there were 3 or 4 softwares like Abacus, Galileo. These were like, booking system softwares which are available, and only a few hotel chains which were large had this central booking or reservation system, right? But somebody somewhere thought of it to create this system which would help manage them, because they had number of properties or number of hotels, and they had that in different locations. So in order to get a budget or an inventory of the number of rooms available, which were at any given point in time available, somebody created this particular software to better manage the inventory in terms of rooms availability. Correct? Now, if you have to open a hotel, or if you have to open a resort, or if you have to offer a facility, you will not be able to function even without having something called a central booking or reservation software. Correct? So this is becoming a bare necessity. If you have to get into this business, if you have to get into bed and breakfast, or anything in terms of a business for tourism, you have to have this basic software in place which allows you to get immediate availability of rooms or inventory across different number of properties that you manage. So technology is being used as a driver to create differentiation, and management and this strategic thinking approach is actually being looked at to create that competitive advantage. Are you able to see this clearly? Are you able to see the connect?
Yes, very clear.
Okay, good stuff. Now we look at historical developments of how strategic management came about. There are lots of iconic figures which have come across with lots of different things. So when you look at Igor Ansoff, he created the Ansoff matrix. When you look at Peter Drucker, he's called the management guru, or somebody who invented strategic management. So these people made valuable contributions in terms of they studied a lot of organizations, and they felt that without these processes in place, it will be difficult for organizations to be able to manage functions or business activities that they do on a day in, day out basis. So when we look at strategic management, we normally see this term actually originated in the 50s and the 60s, and these were 4 people which kind of contributed to the creation of this as a concept. Now, Alfred Chandler spoke about strategy and structure. That means if you have a large number of people working within the organization, you have to have an organizational structure, and that structure then defines the strategy within the organization. And we look at structures which have over the years come across things like hierarchical structure, flat structure, horizontal structure, divisional structure, and these structures to a certain extent shape the culture of the organization also. And a very brief example that I would give here is, when you look at most of the Japanese organizations, they have a very flat structure. So when you see their offices, you will see the management, everybody sits on the same floor. They don't have any cabins and things like that. And the idea there is, the Japanese or the Asian philosophy in terms of structure meant was that they want to have an open culture or an open door policy wherein every employee has access to the top management. And that led to a culture which means that the system is quite democratic. But at the same time, if you look at the Japanese society, it is quite autocratic. There is a lot of, the supreme leader or whatever the person says, everybody has to follow.
Yes, right.
In short, Alfred Chandler looked at, strategy and structure, and he created a connect with this when we look at organizations. So when you look at American organizations, they follow functional structure. You look at Microsoft, for example, it has different structures, like it has Xbox, which is gaming. You have Windows, which is Windows operating system as an organization. You look at Apple, for example, there's iPhone side of organization. So what they've done is they've structured it across, from a point of view of their functional products which go to market. Now, Philip Sesnack basically came across with tools and techniques which organizations could actually look at for studying the environment, both internally and externally, which affect the business or the business activities of the organization. And here we look at factors like PESTEL. We study factors which affect the business or the business activities externally, internally. We look at SWAT analysis as a tool, and some of these tools were related to the process of strategy and strategic management within the organization. Now, Ansoff came across with a lot of different things. So one of the most important things that we study in, strategic marketing is called the Ansoff matrix. And he created this matrix wherein, it has 4 quadrants, and it talks about if a company is well established, do they need to look at, getting into newer markets? Do they need to look at making new products? Do they need to look at developing the market? Look at horizontal vertical integration. So these are concepts which are actually a part of the Ansoff matrix which came about. And the Ansoff matrix basically talks about, focusing on factors which allow you to grow the business or understand, as a strategic planning tool, help you to understand a framework where the management needs to put in focus. And that framework actually consists of 4 quadrants. So it talks about, things like the X and Y quadrants, and here it has 4 basic things which include things like, market penetration, product development, it talks about what you call horizontal and vertical integration, and then it talks about product development. So he gave across a very important concept when organizations started to expand, and they looked at 4 different strategies which they could focus on, and that is something which I'll send you a handout on, which you can study just to understand the process approach. Peter Drucker, he's called the marketing guru, management guru, apart from Philip Kotler. He focused in, kind of stressed on the fact that management needs to have objectives in place. You need to have roles and responsibilities or goals and objectives, and the concept of MBO. When you see leaders within organization or managers within organization, what they tend to do is they tend to focus on achieving the objectives. And the focus of achieving the objectives actually helps the organization achieve its goals, which are set annually or, quarterly, 6 monthly or annually. So he brought across the concept of something called management by objectives. Now, why does the term strategic management come again and again in this unit is because it is termed as a continuous process. That means, the organization is continuously striving to achieve a particular status. So when we look at the concepts of, continuous quality management, CQM, TQM, total quality management, here the idea is the organization never stops in terms of its, process to achieve a particular status. Once it achieves that, it sets new goals and objectives, and it starts to work towards that goalpost. So the goalpost keeps moving. And the idea here is that in terms of understanding the customer and the customer services, because in this sector, what we do get to see is things change quite quickly, right? Preferences of customers are king. So if the preferences are not, you are not able to gauge the change in preferences and the pattern of what customers want, you cannot serve them in terms of services, and you tend to lose out on business, and you can even your services could become even obsolete. So because the process of providing these services is continuous within this sector, that is why the process of strategic management to a certain extent is applied in this sector, so that these changes can be continuously changed, adapted, amended to provide better quality of service or better service as matching the preference of the customer. Is that okay?
Yep.
Now, there are lots of benefits of strategic management, we talk about, and this is a document that we're going to look at primarily, which will answer things like, so up till now, what we've done is we are trying to cover the evolution of strategic management as an approach, and I'm trying to relate it to the tourism and hospitality sector. Okay. Now, going forward, what we're going to look at is we're going to look at why is strategic management important, and how does it help in terms of businesses, primarily for say for example, how does it help people who are primarily in the business of hospitality or managing hospitality as a business. Okay? So there are lots of benefits, and I think when the benefits have to be looked at, or when people look at the process of strategic management in this sector, what they start off with is something called establishing, something called, vision and mission, because the vision and mission has to be defined for you to be able to have that understanding common across the staff. So management has to first document what they want to achieve, why they want to achieve, how they want to achieve. And this has to be formulated in some sort of a vision of the company. Vision is then translated into mission, which are measurable objectives, and then mission of the company is translated into something called, yearly objectives, 3 to 5 year, 5 year to 10 year, whatever that kind of planning the company does, into all those objectives, which then can be broken down into something which is given across to people at various levels in the management. So it could be something as a lower management, middle management, and the top management. An example of that would be, if you look at, just as an example, I'll pick up the industry, which is, say, mobile phones. So when I look at mobile phones, there is a fierce competition between Apple and Samsung, right? Now, Samsung's management has put this in place, that they want to look at products which are better than the iPhone, and they want to maintain a market leadership position. Now, that goal, which has been set by the management, is basically, looking at setting a vision for the company, that whatever we produce, we will produce to a quality which will, set a benchmark in the market. Now, when you look at that, these goals are then broken down into, measurable goals or SMART goals. Says, they will say, okay, we need to introduce this, we need to, and like C8 as a product. Now, once set for the management by the chairman or the top management of the company, we look at the nitty-gritty of how people will work into creating that product. And when we look at that nitty-gritty, they look at basically, following micro objectives or smaller objectives which are required to create that product. So then we get into preferences of what customers want. It should have a better camera, it should have more battery life, larger screen. These are preferences which come across, and once these come across, what will happen is the people in different divisions, engineering, production, R&D, they'll start to work in it. And once they start to work on those products and features, at some stage in 12 months, 18 months time frame, whatever has been set as a goal and objective, they will be able to come across with a prototype or a type of product which then is going to be commercially tested, or tested internally and then commercially launched. Now, that process is what you get to see when a strategy is formed in the organization. So you have the top level or the top tier strategy, which is translated into middle tier, and then from there it is translated or given across as roles and responsibilities to people who will actually start working on that goal and objective for the organization. And within that, you will see different teams being formed, different programs being formed, different sets of people working within the organization. And this then can be broken across into some sort of a process which you will see working within the organization. So what will happen is the engineering team will go away, the R&D team will go away, they'll create something in terms of basic, set of, a basic prototype of a product, and they will come back within 6 months. It will be positioned or discussed and placed with the management, and they will say, okay, this is fine, this is fine, this meets the benchmark, this is what was set, and this is okay, but this is not okay, this is not meeting the criteria, and they go back to the table again, and then after a few weeks make some changes, come back on that, and once that is ready, then the product is then handed over to a different team to start looking at commercializing it, and those kind of things are also followed when we look at the process of strategic management. So starting with the vision, then looking at mission, looking at objectives, and then breaking it down into smaller segments for most common people working within the organization to be able to understand that would be a process well broken down from top tier to the bottom tier of the organization. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Now, having looked at some of the reasons of why strategic management came about, what it helps to do, how it kind of is put into the practice within an organization, there are some key components or models that we need to understand before we apply these tools within this sector. Now, when we look at applying these tools, these are the set of tools which actually were created by some of the innovative and creative thinkers like Peter Drucker, Ansoff, and all these guys. So these are 5 tools that we look at which are required for us to understand the process of strategic management. They are applied in different places, but these 5 tools broadly are the 5 forces model. It's called the Porter's 5 forces model. You have PEST, or political, economic, social, and technological factors which affect the business. SWOT analysis, which is strength, opportunities, weakness, and threats. BCG matrix, which was invented by Boston Consulting Group, and it talks about it maps the product positioning of a particular company with respect to the competition, and it has 4 quadrants. We'll come to that in a bit more detail. And value chain analysis, and these are 5 tools which help us understand the application of strategy and the factors which affect the organization. And these tools and techniques is what we need to be able to study when we look at the learning outcome 1 in terms of strategic management and approach to strategic management, and how and what are the tools that you use within this approach to understand strategy and look at strategic planning. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and send you a handout which basically covers these 5 models that you need to study, so that you have a good understanding from a theoretical concept point of view, the Porter's 5 forces model. Now, where is the model applied? Why is it applied? And in what situations it is applied. So when you look at the Porter's 5 forces model, basically the reason why it is called the 5 forces model is that there are 5 different types of forces which actually affect the business, right? And as it points out these 5 blocks, there are always people who are trying to enter the business. So when we look at, you're in a competitive you're in a place wherein the market for tourism is quite competitive, when you look at Maldives in particular, because most of the economy is tourism dependent. So a lot of people always are looking at opening up resorts or hotels or doing leisure activities in that area, because that economy has a tropical climate. It is throughout the year people can visit, and most of the economy in terms of the weather and other features which actually affect the business are favorable for tourism. So when we look at these, we look at 5 forces model, and what we say is there are always new people who are trying to come across and offer these services. There are buyers, which could be customers. There are suppliers, which are predominantly people who actually supply services. So when you look at a hotel, we are, from an outward perspective, we just look at the hotel. But within the hotel, there are loads of departments and services. So there is food and beverage, there is laundry department, there is administration, there is sales and marketing, there is restauranting. There are loads of other departments which need to work to be able to provide these services. Now, sometimes when you look at restaurant and you go to a hotel which has a 24-hour coffee shop and they have a large menu, most of the food which is served, sometimes it is made during the normal working hours by the chefs. But if you order something outside working hours, the restaurant will still end up providing you the menu. But a lot of raw material for that to stress that kind of dish or that food is actually coming across from the suppliers. They might
Yep.
supply of eggs, for example. I don't know. I'm just thinking aloud. Maybe in a hotel, 5,000 eggs are eaten every day, right? So egg,
Yep.
if this is requirement, then they must have a supplier for providing poultry or eggs or milk products primarily coming across to the hotel. So lots of suppliers are also in the value chain, which kind of affect the business. Then there are substitutes. Sometimes you will see there are other hotels or other chains which will come in, they will undercut the price, give you the same product or service, but with a slight bit of variation. And those will be constituting or called as, substitutes. But the
Mhm.
Porter's five forces model essentially, is a framework which allows you to analyze your competition across these five broad parameters. And what it allows you to do is it allows you to draw into the economics of understanding which particular factor is going to intensify or maybe give you the most trouble in the short run, short to the long run. So, for example, if you see Maldives is opening up, say as an economy, the government is allowing or encouraging foreign investment into resorts. What will happen is a lot of companies will come in and want to open, properties or buy land and, offer services. Now, in
Mhm.
that case, what that would mean is the people who are existing and present within the environment offering these services would feel or come under pressure. So somebody who's already in this business for a number of years, they would employ a Potter's model to do an overview and an analysis of understanding how much of this threat will be real, how much will it intensify, what are the areas wherein the threat will come in, and what areas they will need to shape in to try and address this competition.
Mhm.
Okay, so
Yep.
basically it looks at giving you some in kind of inflection or an overview of what the micro environment is going to be in contrast to the macro environment. That means internal threats, internal factors at the business coming together to affect the business, and then from that you'll be able to know which factor is going to affect you the most, and that is the one that most companies will look at countering first, so that they are able to have a business continuity or let the business continue profitably.
Yes.
The second one is looking at pest. Now, pest is a tool which basically allows you to analyze or look at factors which affect the business externally. So this is primarily for macro environment. That means things which are beyond the control of the business. Now, if your exchange rate falls, or if there is suddenly an inflation in the economy, or if the prices begin to rise, now this will not just affect you; it will affect all the hotel chains, all the resorts, everybody in that place, right?
Mhm.
Now,
Right.
this could be because of factors which are outside the business. That means the change in government, change in policies would affect not just your business, maybe other resorts or other business as well. If the economical changes happen, things like a recession, when we had the financial crisis in 2007-8, it did not affect just America, it affected the entire world. So
Mhm.
these are factors which are beyond your control. And here, the idea is the business uses PEST as a tool to be able to understand the factors which can affect its business and its operations externally. And these factors, if you're able to understand for the business, you're able to prepare or take appropriate, steps in order to kind of, bolster your business or kind of protect yourself from these factors externally. A simple example is sometimes you see that, you know, um, because of maybe if Maldives as an economy, they import everything pretty much from abroad, isn't it? Water,
Yeah.
food, vegetables, everything, fruit and veg, everything
Yeah.
comes from outside. So
That's right.
what most of the finance managers or management in the hotel chains would do is they kind of hedge on the local currency and its convertibility with dollar. If they see that the dollar is falling, what they will do is they'll buy some more inventory, because that would mean they will be able to buy some of this raw material cheap, and then they can store it internally, which would mean that in the long run they might gain some more profits or make some more money on the inventory when it is cheap, isn't it?
Mhm.
So these
Yep.
kind of things can only be looked at when you look at, employing something as a tool called PEST. Similarly, you have SWAT, and SWAT is primarily, I think you must have come across SWAT number of times. It is to
Yes.
look at your internal strengths and your areas which are primarily opportunities for you. And when you look at internal environment, we look at strengths and weaknesses, and you look at external, we look at opportunities and threat. And this could be done for any particular hotel, any particular business, any particular situation. And we will take this up as an example and a case study for Maldives. Now, BCG matrix, as I explained to you earlier, this is a matrix which was invented to understand your market position with regards to the sector. So if you work within a particular hotel and they want to find out that how are we placed vis-a-vis the market and other competitors in the market, they will use this tool to do some analysis. So this tool helps them understand their market positioning as compared to competitors, and what kind of products they have, the services they have, which other competitors also offer, and what is their how is their product offering compared to competitors offering in terms of market share and the position in the market. A simple example is, if somebody is to get into offering say tourism services in Maldives, they might have a head-on competition with somebody who's already been established for 50 years. But the new person opening the resort might come across with some innovative idea saying that, okay, we are going to open a resort on a lagoon and everything around you will be water. There is no, everything around the place that you stay will be actually in the surroundings of water. Now, this is a very innovative concept, but there might be some other products already available from other providers in that area. And that would mean that they will have to competitively price it, look at other factors which could affect, and how it will look at differentiation. So BCG matrix has an ability for you to be able to have 4 different types of quadrants. Question marks are products which are new, and this is something that you're introducing for the first time, but you don't know whether this product is going to be successful or not, and that is why it is termed as a question mark. Stars are products which are which have got caught on with the demand in the market, and they have further potential to develop, both in terms of market, in terms of product features. And here that product at some point in time, so if you look at the flow, it happens within the quadrant. It happens from here. You will see that the flow basically would mean that you will have a product being introduced in the question mark stage, then you'll go to star stage. Cash cow is when the product is doing extremely well. It is a faster selling product. So when you look at airlines, you look at hotels, most of the economy rooms or family suites get sold quite quickly. You do not need to put any marketing efforts behind it, but most companies would put marketing effort behind selling presidential suites or executive suites, which are where the value is quite high, and only limited set of customers actually end up taking up those services. Correct?
Correct.
So here you look at cash cow, the product which is selling and has a lot of market share for the company. The reason why it is called cash cow is it is the biggest revenue generator for the company. So if I look at Apple and Samsung at this moment, the biggest cash cow product for them is, which is the product which gets them the most revenue?
Sorry?
If I look at Apple and Samsung from a point of view of the company,
mobile
which
phone.
is the product which gets them the maximum revenue?
Mobile phone.
That is correct. So for them, iPhone and the Android Galaxy Samsung 8 is the cash cow product for them. So they are developing a lot of products which start off in the question mark, go to stars, cash cow, and the product which is now in decline, or services which is in decline. Can you think of a service which is in decline in the hotels?
Service in the hotels which is in decline.
Yeah. Any service that you can think of?
I think I cannot think of, because most of the things also that we are trying to add in as much as possible, all the activities that and even services that we can provide, to compete with the others. In decline, right. I'm not sure.
So in terms of when you look at say for example, I think when you think of services which the hotel provides, what can you think of? something which is not being used now, or is the utility of those things is actually declining, as far as um, they used to maybe give a larger value, but what we do get to see is that they are now not contributing that much revenue.
Oh, I think for now, I mean, when it comes to technology, because I think last time there should be like a computer lounge or business lounge, which they provide computers. But now because of Wi-Fi and everything, as much as possible, they are targeting to provide at least like a stronger Wi-Fi where the guests can at least from their room access all using their own devices and connect to the internet.
That is correct, absolutely, yeah.
Yep.
But that is also correct what you've said. But I think some of the services, if I look at the hospitality index, or the forecast index which is coming in now. Now, what the sector is basically saying is there are some types of services which are on a decline within this sector. Now, these services include things like in-room delivery. People are not ordering more; they want to go out and eat at restaurants. Especially in the UK, when we look at with the facilities,
Oh yeah.
Uber
Yeah,
Eats
but
and
actually, yeah, but
yeah,
actually in Maldives, this one is still very much available because,
right.
like for example, in our resort, it is an island where restaurants are not available if you go out. Yeah, so most of the time, if the guests don't want to use our restaurant, which we have, so they will choose in-room dining.
That is correct. So I think depending on the market, what is happening is that there are some services in some areas or location which are currently under decline, and these services are in decline because there is no longer, maybe, or the requirements are changing, and the other is that there is the customers in general are not very fussed about that fact they need this kind of a service when they check in into a
Yeah.
hotel and things like that.
Yeah,
So
I think if you are staying in the city, I mean if the
yeah.
hotel is in the city, then and then that I think that's how it is applicable that instead of getting in villa dining or in room dining, you prefer to go out and then try the restaurants around the hotels.
That's fine, yeah. So you get the idea in general. I think there are lots of things which obviously I was looking at, the Gazette, which is published by PwC, which talks about the rise and decline of services in the UK tourism sector, and they have identified a number of services which are declining, but they have also listed down a lot of services which are new services which the hotels are adopting, and some of the things like the availability of Wi-Fi. A lot of customers now do not even book a hotel if they don't have Wi-Fi within the hotel.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
like a basic requirement.
Yeah,
So,
that's right.
so I think that is fine. So basically, looking at now, last model is something called value chain analysis, because this sector has a lot of suppliers. There are lots of things. So this sector also supports a lot of other ancillary industries or similar businesses which get employment from this particular sector, tourism. And one of the key things which a lot of management, the management in any particular hotel, any particular business within the sector look at, is they employ a tool called value chain analysis. Now, the reason they do this is because they are looking at the most efficient and most appropriate, productive, productive or cost effective way to be able to secure things, or raw material to be able to provide these services. Now, value chain analysis essentially helps them meet this criteria by minimizing wastage of time, costs, and at the same point in time, going to the suppliers or partners which directly are able to provide these services, cutting out the middlemen. So sometimes you will see a value chain analysis would look at coming up with this type of a chart, which you see on the slide, where in a hotel, which will be pretty much the center, they will look at what part of material comes from where, from where they could look at minimizing cost. If it is coming to 2 or 3 different channels and there are 2 or 3 different intermediaries, they would want to cut that out to try and achieve some cost efficiency. So this is one of the tools which also is used in order to implement strategy, and then look at kind of let's put it this way, rationalizing the value chain in terms of processing part of the value chain. When raw material is converted to inputs are converted to outputs, and they want to look at the process in the middle to be able to kind of minimizing wastage, both in terms of time, quality, and costs. Now,
Mm-hmm.
other bits that you have in this presentation, I'm going to send this to you on the email. Now, I'm not going to go through is because this then looks at some of the things which how do we utilize these tools to look at forecast? How do we look at these tools to look at making decisions? And some in terms of some of the slide, why they are because I think it needs to be. I need to probably the background that I put in. So I need to look at. So some of these things are for information because this itself, when we look at OTHM putting together strategic management and marketing. Now, some of the tools that you want to look at studying would be important because we will use that in the other learning outcomes when we study marketing related terms and terminology. So slides, when I send this to you, I think slide up until slide 22, so not even 22, up until slide 21 is directly to your learning outcome 1.
Okay.
And in this, it helps you to cover the evolution of strategic management approach. It talks about why it is important for tourism and hospitality businesses. And then you get a bit of perspective into how strategic management is applied in travel and tourism or any other business for that sake. We look at these 5 tools which have been invented to, help businesses understand their performance and, productivity issues within this sector. Is that okay?
Yes.
Looking at the first, 20 slides to be able to kind of, and I'll put this up as backup slides after this, so that that the first 20 slides, are important for learning outcome 1. Okay.
Okay.
This is where what I will do is I will stop for today, and the idea is I will also send you some handouts now on, say, for example, the Porter's 5 forces model. The value chain analysis. They are going to be basically looking at 2 or 3 pages, which will give you a good understanding of what the model is and how it is applied in the case of travel and tourism industry. Now within travel and tourism, when we say it's a big term, so within this sector, you have airlines, you have events, you have hotels, you have leisure resorts, you have Disneyland parks, the leisure parks. You have agents, you have online travel agencies, which are things like, which are comparison sites. So it's a vast sector. So people talk about it from a point of view of just hotels and resorts and inns and, that kind of bed and breakfast, those kind of things. But they do not realize that this sector actually encompasses everything which provides a consolidated service to a customer who's going on a holiday. So you go on a holiday, you visualize it. What you will realize is that you start with the process of shortlisting a location. Once you have done that, you go and book a hotel. Then once you've done that, you book other facilities or leisure activities that you do, like you'll go to a safari, you'll do this, you do that. Then you look at booking your flights, you look at shortlisting your restaurants, you look at maybe buying some gear that might be required. So for example, if you're going to a location where you want to do a bit of rock climbing or a field trip, you buy a little bit of gear. Then you prepare in terms of other features, things like you buy certain things like travel insurance and other bits. So all this, if I ask you to visualize, it will help you to understand that this is how big this sector is, and it encompasses all these services. It's not just hotels or leisure resorts when we talk about tourism and hospitality industry. It is all these companies, all these products and services which basically make this sector, right?
Right.
So what I'm going to do is, in order to help you to do your assignment and the tasks which are given up here, the idea would be to try and give you some handouts. And these handouts will essentially, if you read these handouts will actually help you to understand the concept, what we've discussed using the PowerPoint presentations. And it will also help you to do the assignment when you address these tasks. Okay. So the handouts that I would give you primarily would be very directive handouts. That means they're related to the topic. They are concise in terms of their information, and they get you to the point to understand the concept pretty much straight away.
Okay, sure.
Okay. And now, apart from that, what I'm going to do is, just after the session, I have, we will, in the layout, as I explained to you, you'll have the assignment brief, cover sheet, unit specification, which is what we see here. And then we have an ebook, which is primarily for this particular unit. So
Uh-huh.
what I'm going to also do is for you to be able to look at developing. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
So in order for you to be able to develop some deeper understanding of the concepts and things that we've discussed, what I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to do is ask you to read a few pages in that book. Okay?
Okay.
Now,
Okay.
it's a very detailed book, but the idea would be I will tell you which pages to read, and those pages would help you understand what we've discussed today in a greater detail.
Mm-hmm.
So if
Okay.
you're looking at concise knowledge, and if you're looking at straight away getting into the assignment from a point of view of attempting it, the idea would be to look at the handouts which I send you. But if you're looking at developing deeper knowledge and you want to do a bit of more research to get, more understanding on the topics and the concepts, then I'm going to get you to read some pages in the book.
Okay, sure, sure.
Okay? No worries.
Yep.
Any questions on this, Mark, so far?
So far, everything is clear. I actually learned a lot in this session. Yeah, but I also have one question regarding the declaration of originality form.
Yes.
Yes,
Tell me.
this one says student number. So which one is this student number?
The student number is the one that you have received an email from OTHM.
Oh, that one. Okay.
That
So it's
number
one.
allows you to trace your, course with
Uh-huh.
an body in the UK, and also in a case, for example, if in as an eventuality, if we are to close as a business, you are still going to be able to continue your course with the awarding body, and they will just transfer you to another center. So that
Oh,
number
okay.
is most important, and this is the number which basically confirms that you are doing this course. And this course, irrespective of where you study, as of now you are aligned with us, but this
Uh-huh.
gives ownership of your kind of doing the course with the awarding organization.
Okay, okay.
This is a unique learner reference number. With this
Uh-huh.
number, you can place an inquiry with OTHM. You can place an inquiry anywhere, and you can say that, okay, I'm studying this course, and you moment you give them the registration number, they'll be able
Mm-hmm.
to pinpoint that, okay, you are studying with UK University, you are doing this course which is approved and authorized by OTHM, and that's the qualification.
Uh-huh. Okay,
So
sure,
this
sure.
number is what you need to mention.
Okay, 10.
Okay, no worries. Okay, Mark, you enjoy the rest of your evening, and I will catch up with you this week. What I'm going to also do is send you another invite. So we will continue to have one sessions on Sunday, like we're having today, and we will
Okay.
start off another session in order so that you're able to speed your course up. And that is again, we'll keep it for the timing of your timing at 9 o'clock there, but we'll
Yes,
try and
correct.
do sessions on either a Tuesday or a Wednesday.
Yes, sure. So how many sessions do we have to do in a week?
I think what I would suggest is for the first 4 to 6 weeks to get you adjusted and also for you to be able to pace up with the course, I would suggest 2 sessions a week, one on
Mm-hmm.
Sunday and one on Tuesday oblique Wednesday. And what we will do is we will start off 2 units. One of the units I'm going to be teaching, and one of the other units, one of my colleagues will start teaching. So
Okay,
you
sure,
are
sure.
actually looking at covering 2 units in every 4 to 6 weeks. And because there are 6 units, so you should be able to complete the course towards the end of April.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, sure, sure. 2 sessions in a week is
Yeah.
yeah, is fine. Yeah.
Is that okay? So
Yes.
day-wise, are you happy, if I schedule something for Tuesday oblique Wednesday?
I think Wednesday should be okay.
Okay, that's fine. So Wednesday, we'll
Yes.
look at about 4 o'clock UK time, which will be
Yes.
about 9 o'clock your time.
Yes. Sure.
And what I'm going to do is today you have only one invite, which is for today's session. But by tomorrow, what will happen is you will have at least 5 or 6 invites which will come. And what will those do is they will be for different dates and different sessions which are happening across the month of February and March.
Okay. Sure. 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 That would be
Invite
great. Yeah.
immediately. Yeah, don't accept all the invites immediately. They'll be for different sessions. So just add them to your calendar, and then as and when you are attending the session, just accept that invite so that we are able to do that class on that particular day.
All right. Sure. Sure. Yeah. Noted.
Good stuff. And I'll try and come back to you with the arrangement of this offer letter